Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most overpowered and broken civilizations in all of AoE2 history. Now this game has been around for over 25 years, so you'd expect things to have been overpowered at some point in time. However, the civilization we're going to be talking about today is actually a quite recent addition to the game, and a civilization that came with the launch of the definitive edition, and that civilization is the Cumans. Yes, the Cumans on launch were absolutely bonkers. They had some incredibly unique aspects like the second TC and Feudal Age. They had some really overpowered units and also a crazy well-rounded civilization overall. This civilization was nuts, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive and analyzing just how crazy it was. But of course, I couldn't have done this video by myself. I had to go ahead and give a call to T West, and so together we're going to be tackling this video. He will give you guys some insight as to why the Cumans were broken, and I will be talking about how the pro players use these broken and overpowered aspects in a practical sense in a real game. We'll also talk about how the Cumans are right now today compared to how they were upon launch, and kind of bring in this whole Cuman topic to a close very nicely. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
The Cumans have changed quite a bit since their release. They're still a strong civ and really tricky to play against in a variety of situations, but looking back, they were loaded with overpowered bonuses and units that made them insanely strong to play. Their first bonus is their additional town center. The early TC was originally a bonus of the Atlanteans in Asian mythology and of the Portuguese in AoE 3. And here in AoE 2, the Cumans can add a second TC in the Feudal Age. When initially released, the second town center took 2 minutes and 30 seconds to build, the same time as a normal TC. It was pretty much automatic to build it as soon as possible, since there was no real economic downside to doing so. The Cumans could get off to an insane boom, even on open maps where they still had a strong economy while building the TC. Later on, this build time was nerfed, and currently it takes 4 minutes and 30 seconds to build. This makes it a bit riskier to place on open maps and has a bigger economic impact on villager build times even on closed maps. Usually we see players assigning around 8 villagers to the TC, which now takes them about 1 minute and 20 seconds to construct, compared to around 45 seconds for 8 villagers on a normal TC. That's an extra 35 seconds or so of idle time for each of the 8 villagers.
The 2 TC boom was absolutely revolutionary. As T West mentioned, the town center went up in the same speed, whether it be in Feudal Age or in Castle Age. So the Cuman player simply being able to drop a town center in Feudal Age was absolutely broken for multiple reasons, by the way. Number one, the town center is an incredible economic building. It lets you make more villagers, basically doubling your village production from 1 town center to 2. But not only that, it also provides incredible defense because a town center with 6 range and the ability to garrison 15 villagers or 15 units in general makes for a very sturdy base layout and incredibly solid defense on its own. So you make the second town center in Feudal Age, and right away you've got extra protection and doubling your economic power and growth, making for a very solid advantage. This put your opponent in such a tricky spot. They basically have one of 2 options. Either they try to fast castle and ignore your 2 town center play and just try to push you in Castle Age, or they can try to attack you in Feudal Age and disrupt your 2 TC boom. Notice there's no third option of outbooming you because there was simply no outbooming the 2 TC play from Cumans back then. It was simply impossible. The second TC went up too quickly. And so, okay, we've got 2 choices. Either you go for the fast castle and you try to push the Cuman player, or you try to disrupt him in the Feudal Age. Well, both of these options ended up being pretty bad. If you try to go for the fast castle approach, there was simply nothing stopping your opponent playing as the Cumans, or you playing as the Cumans, from simply going for extra army in Feudal Age while doing the 2 TC play. You can easily add in some archers or add in some scouts to pressure your opponents, even if they're the ones going for the fast castle and trying to be the guys attacking you. You basically never let them become the aggressor. And if they try to attack you in Feudal Age, this was probably the most preferred option at the time. It was still really hard to execute because you had 2 TCs, which gave you that added layer of defense, and with the extra villagers, you were actually able to fight off early aggression using them. And so your opponent had to attack into added town center, into extra villagers, and you have to do enough damage before you're able to get out military of your own. An incredibly tough task, and something that is just so hard for the opponent to ever try and do. So the Cuman player had just an insane setup from the get-go every single game. And lastly, to make matters worse, the Cuman player had the stronger walls, which made it that much harder to punish the boom, be it with the fast castle or with the Feudal Age aggression. Cumans almost always had an extra economic advantage going out of the Feudal Age.
And what did you make as as the Cumans after booming, your first option was the Step Lancer, and oh boy, this unit was insane. Comparing the release version to the nerfed Steppy we have now, it cost 30 gold instead of 40, had 10 attack instead of 9, a reload time between attacks of 1.9 seconds instead of 2 seconds, a faster movement speed of 1.5 instead of 1.45, the ability to go extra fast because the Cumans had access to Husbandry on top of their original 10% speed bonus, and most of all, the unit had a smaller collision size. They could be packed even more tightly than now, and with the one range they have, it let them do an incredible amount of damage all at once. Everyone notes how the pathfinding can affect units in DE, but by combining the stacking with their range, Step Lancers could essentially avoid any pathfinding issues while the enemy units were running around unable to hit them.
As you can clearly see, the Step Lancer was nerfed in basically every way imaginable. Pretty much all of their stats have been lowered to make them a bit more manageable for their opponents. The thing is, the Step Lancer with all of those buff stats back in the day pretty much had absolutely no counter whatsoever. They had the extra range that made them incredibly solid in any melee combat. They were super fast to snipe down any ranged units that your opponent could muster onto the field. They were even able to chase down cavalry archers, just to give you an idea of how strong they are. And on top of all that, if you did stack 20 or 30 Step Lancers, you can break down buildings so quickly, so your opponent had almost no way to stop a massive Step Lancers. He couldn't fight them head on because pretty much no units except Step Lancers can match the Step Lancers, and he couldn't even attempt to buy enough time because besides stone walls, which is the only thing that can keep the Step Lancers out, there's basically nothing that can hold them. Even castles and town centers didn't do enough because Step Lancers walking right past them can easily find damage elsewhere, and that was a completely fine option. Walls like houses, palisade walls, maybe production buildings all went down way too quickly due to the high attack and easy stacking power of the Step Lancers. So imagine the situation where your Cuman player comes out of feudal age with a significant economy lead, and he techs right into Step Lancers with 2 or 3 stables, starting to mass one of the most overpowered units in the game for a relatively cheap cost, and on top of that having more villages than you. You can't outscale him, you can't fight him, and he has more economy. Good luck. And players like Vivi, for example, were abusing the Step Lancers in all kinds of ways. You couldn't even imagine taking a fight against someone like Vivi because he would be stand ground patrolling those bad boys and being completely ready to fight on one tile with 20 or 30 Step Lancers stacked on it. So if you want to fight him, your units would not be able to attack them, and all of the Step Lancers will be attacking at the exact same time. Think about how strong pros were microing back then and today, and think of how good the Step Lancer is to fit into that top tier micro that the pros have. It was a deadly combination of a broken unit and amazing micro from pro players that made this unit completely unstoppable on the rank ladder.
And if the Step Lancer wasn't enough, next we have the Kipchak. This unique unit shoots multiple arrows, but the extra arrows are the same ones shot by the Chukonu. These have 0 melee attack, which means they're super effective at taking down rams, which have -3 melee armor, and whereas the Chukonu needs to stand still and shoot repeatedly, the Kipchak shoots all of its arrows at once. Oh, and on release, the unit had 0 attack delay. Attack delay is the gap between when you right-click a target and when the unit actually shoots. Elite Mangudai and Elite Mamelukes in AOC felt buttery smooth to micro because they had no delay whatsoever. You right-clicked and they instantly shot. In fact, the micro was so powerful that eventually Forgotten Empires added a short delay to these units. Now, they originally attempted to balance the Kipchak by giving them limited range and restricting the Cumans from researching Bracer, but that didn't really help. In the hands of a pro, catching up to these instantly firing units was nearly impossible, especially since, as Cuman cavalry, they moved extra fast. Eventually, these units were nerfed too. Now they have an attack delay of half a second, which is half that of the 1 second delay of the Cav Archer. They also had their HP reduced by 5 hit points, their reload time between attacks increased from 1.8 to 2.2 seconds, and of course were slowed down slightly by the removal of Husbandry.
The Kipchaks were probably the best unique unit upon release, and of course with their super smooth 0 attack delay, and the fact that they're on a horse with extra movement speed from the Cuban bonus and Husbandry, they were both a really fast and really powerful unit. You couldn't kill them with siege weapons because they shot multiple arrows and can easily kill them. You couldn't really tech into any kind of cavalry. Even camelry didn't work because the Kipchuks can easily kite those down and deal pretty much infinite damage as long as you're able to hit and run. They can stay safe while dishing out crazy DPS, and so any kind of melee unit in general just didn't fare too well against the Kipchak. And so lastly, the one option that barely worked was basically the Elite Skirmisher and the crossbows. And I say barely worked because at the end of the day, the Kipchak Kipchak is on a horse, so you can pretty much avoid fighting any of these units if you don't want to by simply running away. And to make matters worse, if you go for the Kipchuks, you have that defensive castle, and in most games the humans would go for the 2TC boom, and if your opponent tries to pressure you, you just drop that defensive castle, you're up 20 villagers, the castle will defend you against the push, and then on top of that you're able to make the Kipchuks one of the most broken unique units in the game, and definitely the most broken at that time. And so you have the Kipchuk, the economy lead, the defensive castle. There was basically no stopping that human setup. And so the Kipchuk acted as such an insane option to go for when you do need to go for the castle defense, or if you're up against some crazy camel civilizations. As you can see, the humans had multiple options in their arsenal in terms of army, and on top of the Kipchuk and the Step Lancer, they had very nice knights and camels that they can easily go for in Castle Age. So they were not lacking options besides these two units. They just simply acted as the best two units in the game they could possibly go for, and they also served really different and unique purposes. So whether you go for the Kipchuk or whether you go for the Step Lancer, you're doing some crazy things with the humans.
The humans definitely gave anyone who played with them a huge leg up. When DE first came out, I was around 1850 on Rubli, but was able to win easily against players who were several hundred points higher just by picking humans. No special tricks to it, just booming with the TC and making Step Lancers. But then, in the hands of an expert who truly knew how to use their bonuses, the humans were a sight to behold. Some players would force pick humans nearly every game because of how strong they felt to play. Even in team games, you could encounter stacks of 4 players all force picking humans. There really was no avoiding them. And we haven't even touched on the feudal rams. There were so many ways to use the Civ, and creative players would find every opportunity to take advantage of them.
Well, there you have it, guys. The humans, upon release of the definitive edition, is probably one of the most broken civilizations to ever touch Age of Empires 2. Their ability to be a perfectly well-rounded civilization with perfect economy, perfect unit options, and incredible diversity within the Civ just made them impossible to play against, and it's no surprise that a lot of nerfs went their way. Of course, fast forwarding until today, they did receive some buffs to compensate some of the nerfs that they did receive, and so nowadays they're a much more well-balanced civilization that has strengths and weaknesses like every other well-balanced civilization in the game. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of fun to kind of destroy everyone with a combo of the Step Lancer and Kipchuk running around the map and destroying buildings, units alike, and just running around and raiding and killing all kinds of villagers. But I'm happy that that fun was short-lived, because if that was how humans are long-term for the game's history, I think a lot of people would have probably quit because of that. So in the end, we had our fun, but it was time to move on, and so nowadays the human version we have in the game are much better suited for a healthy game. Thank you so much for watching the video. I want to do a huge shout out to T West for joining me for this video. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description, and I highly recommend you check it out. He has some amazing Age of Empires 2 videos, and I definitely want you guys to send some love his way. Let me know if you guys want to see more videos like this, either with T West or other AoE2 content creators. I wanted to bring more collaborations to the AoE2 scene, because I think that's exactly what we're lacking as a community, bringing in different creators and different fan bases together and enjoying some top tier content. Thanks so much for watching. Like the video, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.